Serious. People who walked out of a job interview. Why did you do it? Applied for a software developer position for an online retailer. First round of interviews was a traditional technical skills and whiteboard coding session. Second round was a cultural fit interview with ours. I assumed it would be an one-on-one interview with ours. It was a room with 20 something people applying for anything from legal to finance. They asked us to stand up, then crawl into a ball, and pretend we were flowers opening. At this point I honestly thought it was some kind of prank. Then I saw everybody around me doing it. I just said thanks for the opportunity and left. I once showed up for a job interview in a suit and tie after answering a newspaper ad for a warehouse worker. Instead of a job interview at the warehouse, they had me get into some truck with one of the employees who drove me a few hours away, pulled over in some random neighborhood, and explained to me that the job was going door to door trying to sell cuts of meat to people, unsolicited. I told him this was not the warehouse worker job that they had advertised, and if he didn't bring me back home immediately, I was going to call the police and report a kidnapping. I was brought back to my car, but I was not paid for the several hours of my wasted time. FU, Pacific Prime of Cromwell, Connecticut. Showed up and the manager practically bragged about how the job offered no breaks for an 8 to 10 hour shift, and if there was a food break it would be 5 minutes maximum at a hip height table with no chairs. She said that you'd be fired if you sat down even for 30 seconds. I'm more than capable of doing that. I did that every day at my last job. But when you brag about how your employees are so overworked that they don't get breaks or an option to rest their legs, it tells me all I need to know about how little you value your employees. I should also note that this job wasn't paying exceptionally well, above minimum wage, but not at a level that was even enough to live on. Applied for a teaching job. My current at the time job was at a school for people with disabilities. This new school was a school for children gifted in a particular field. I was headhunted when one of my students from my current school was accepted to the new school. The woman interviewing asked why I wanted to work there, so I explained the above, including student with disability. She goes, with the most disgusted look on her face, "We don't have students like that here." Should point out that I'm also disabled. Was not going to work out obviously. I was approached at work, bagger for a major grocery store chain, when I was 16, by a guy who asked me if I would be interested in making $1,100 a week. He told me to meet him at one of the empty businesses in the same plaza after work. He went on this long spiel about the melaleuca tree from Australia and how his company made soaps and shampoo out of it. Then he told me for $500 he would train me how to sell the products. I just turned and walked out the door with him yelling behind me that I would never amount to anything with my attitude. A jumped up security guard made me walk away before I even got in the building for an interview. I followed the instructions I was sent by the hiring manager, which was to park in the designated guest spaces. Security guard came charging out of the building yelling at me when I was barely out of the car about how I couldn't park there. Then when I raised my voice just to try and get him to listen, he started yelling at me for yelling at him. Eventually when I got to tell him that I was told to park there, he called the hiring manager and started yelling at them about how I'd been yelling at him. Partway through that phone call I thought, nah, F this, got back in the car and drove off. The hiring manager called me to apologize and asked if I'd come back. I politely declined, saying I wanted nothing to do with that security guard again. It was for a management position, running a mailroom, something I'd done twice before. All the standard questions were asked. I felt like it was going well. Then he suddenly says to me, "I'm hearing a lot of I from you. I'm concerned because we are about the team and not the individual. Here, the hell. It's a job interview and you're concerned that I'm answering questions you have asked specifically about me with answers that address your questions about me. That's utterly nonsensical." I don't even remember how I responded, but I knew I didn't want to deal with his stupid semantic word and mind games, which I was sure I'd only seen the surface of. So I steered us right into concluding the interview, and I left. I also made a subtle show of taking back the copies of my resume that I'd brought with me. I applied for a register position at Pizza Hut. I specifically told them during my 2 interviews that I cannot be a delivery driver due to my car being unreliable. They even acknowledged that and told me okay. Got the job. Came in for training on the first day. The very first thing they do is sit me down in a chair and started up a training video on delivery driving. I asked them if I could skip it since I'm only working the register / in the kitchen. And the manager tells me that every position is a delivery driver. Walked out right then and there and got paid for 1 hour of training. Happened fairly recently. Made it to the third interview for a large company. The first two they told me what my role would be. Base pay commission. Told me they were so excited to have me on board because of my experience. So I sit down for the third interview. They again go over my role, my pay, etc. They say they are prepared to offer me that job right now and had the paperwork ready since this morning. But then they say, but we already hired someone for that. So instead what we'd like you to do is, and proceeded to tell me the pay was less than half what they were already offering me prior for a lot more work. Basically I went from being offered a management job to just being asked to train all the new employees they just hired, then step down to cashier for $10 per hour and no guaranteed hours. I stood up and told them I was worried I was wasting their time prior to this interview because I wasn't entirely sold on the job yet. But after today, it's become pretty apparent you guys were the ones wasting my time instead. No thank you. And I left. About an hour later I got a phone call asking for a fourth interview. They called almost every day for 2 weeks asking me to come back and talk to the owner. I had been told it was a marketing job. The first interview was about marketing and took place in an office. I got a call back and was very happy as it meant I'd be able to get out of a call center and do something I liked. I took my last day off. I was allowed to go to the next interview. And when I got there they said they wanted me to go to the local Home Depot with them. I got there and found out it was an MLM. I was so stunned that I let them take me out of the floor and show off the aggressive sales technique they wanted me to use on random customers. I walked out crying because now I had no days off to interview and I was ashamed to have been tricked by the first interview. Third and final interview, all same day, at a tech company. First two went well and I was told this last one just was a formality. They wanted me to join. Interview with the head of the office guy seemed to start well. We walked to the cafeteria, grabbed a couple coffees, and with some small talk we learned we knew some of the same people. We get back to his office and sit down. He looks at my file. It says here you're looking for certain salary. I said yes, and explained it's really close to market for someone with my skills and experience. He looks at me and says, I don't think you're worth it. I said excuse me. He repeated it. I laughed, grabbed my bag, stood up, thanked him for his time, and walked out. The company went out of business like a year later, so I feel I dodged a bullet there. Not quite an interview, but when I finished university I didn't have a sensible job to go to immediately. I went to a job agency and said I was looking for a temporary job for experience working in my chosen field. I didn't mind exactly what it was or really how much it paid. We talked about my existing qualifications and experience. At the end of the interview they said they had the perfect job for me. Someone will pick me up the following morning. I said that I could drive, but no, they would pick me up. Fine. As I said, didn't really care where it was or exactly what I was doing, as long as it met my, admittedly vague, requests, and they assured me that it was. The following day a minibus came to get me. So where did they take me to work? A salad packing factory, to spend the day literally packing salad. I was getting paid. So what did it matter for one day? The worst was finding out over lunch was that if I had literally just turned up at the factory they would have probably given me work. That is what happened for most of the staff there, who were largely seasonal workers from Eastern Europe. And those folk were also paid more than me, not because I was new, but anybody who just turned up would likely get work and get paid more than I was. Obviously they took us there by minibus, so we wouldn't just leave once we'd been tricked into going. So I did exactly that, finished my lunch, and then walked home. I moved to a new city and tried finding a job in my preferred area. I went to an interview where I sat down with two well-polished ladies who were the company owners. One of the women said, "Glad you could make it. Now, before we really begin, I see where you were being paid X amount per hour at your last job. I'm sorry, we can't afford to pay you that much." I immediately smiled, stood right back up, and said, "Thank you for not further wasting my time." The shocked look on both their faces was priceless as I skedaddled on out of there. They were probably expecting negotiations, but honestly, any person who opens an interview with that kind of statement deserves a walkout.